They'd run the classic good cop, hard cop interrogation. Rollo brandished a steely gaze. I've got this. Read about it 100 times. Rollo swaggered past the chair which propped up the slumping Hiram Tolliver. Without even looking at his captive, he began with a long, blustery drawl. Mr. Tolliver remained motionless. Rollo spun around to face him. He'd clearly expected to rouse Mr. Tolliver with his booming voice. Beck and Luca gave each other an unsure glance. Rollo slammed his fist on the table. He grabbed the table lamp and beamed it onto the unconscious face. Mr. Tolliver groaned and slowly lifted his head. He recoiled with a muddled, weary squint. The chair wobbled as he attempted to straighten up. Mr. Tolliver could only make out rough shapes through the glaring light. With a gruff tone, Rollo hoped to both conceal his voice and intimidate. The doubtful expression on Beck and Luca's faces transformed into awe. Rollo, hitting his stride, was now channeling every detective trope his memory could recall. He slammed the table again. Mr. Tolliver's voice became desperate. He was nearly in tears. Mr. Tolliver was in a daze, now more confused than ever. He shook his head, feeling more and more dizzy. His voice faded to a whisper. With that, Mr. Tolliver passed out cold. Rollo swung around with a repentant grimace. Chapter 8. 6 feet under, 3 towns over. The kids spent the rest of the afternoon combing through dusty piles of old county records, desperately searching for anything that could help them make sense of Mr. Tolliver's cryptic utterance. Luca tried to shake the thought of Gran's basement, but his focus wavered. Explosives, messages hidden in jam, dossiers on various town figures, and a corkboard threaded with photos. Gran was the only family he had left. He still couldn't bring himself to believe the worst. But the old map with the symbol of explosives in town square made that difficult. As the sun began to set, the kids were no closer to the truth. shut his book with an assertive nod. Rollo muttered under his breath. Beck slammed her finger down on the open page before glancing. Something tickled the back of Luca's mind. The question hung in the air. Beck rubbed her eyes. Luca's heart was pounding as he approached the house. If he was lucky, Gran, or whoever it was, hadn't gotten back yet. And of course, there was Mr. Tolliver tied up and unconscious in the basement. Dealing with him would be the first order of business. Luca shook out his arms to calm his nerves before entering. He held perfectly still, tempering his breath, and listened closely. She was asleep. His only hope was that she hadn't found Mr. Tolliver before dozing off. Mr. Tolliver was nowhere to be seen. Or maybe Gran knew everything. Luca's hungry stomach groaned. Not realizing it, he'd gone the entire day without eating. Luca rushed over to the pile of jam jars, unscrewed one, and shoveled a handful into his mouth. He flipped the lid to read the label. As Luca climbed the final stair, the emotion of the day dragged heavily on him. With each consecutive step, his legs weakened. His stride began to fall. He tried to grab for the railing to steady himself. Something was wrong. Luca groaned and tried to move. His limbs might as well have been bolted to the ground. Through numb lips, he mumbled just before falling asleep. Chapter 9. A speech to end all speeches. Luca awoke to find himself face down in bed. He moaned into his pillow. Why would Gran drug him? Or rather, why was she trying to drug Mr. Nuncreed? Shaking the questions from his woozy head, Luca snapped back to the matter at hand. Augustus Valentine nervously wiped his brow. Gus cleared his throat and awkwardly loosened his tie. William Kerr bounded on the stage with the energy of a preacher at a big tent revival. He gave Gus a hearty slap on the back and motioned him off the stage. Mr. Kerr pulled a thick stack of note cards out from his vest. Mr. Kerr took a moment to survey the crowd. He wiped away a single... He thumped the podium to emphasize each word. Mr. Kerr nodded confidently, biting his lip. The crowd was silent, in rapt attention. Mr. Kerr methodically made eye contact with each section of the crowd. His voice began to build to a crescendo. The crowd began to look around nervously. Mr. Kerr quickly flicked through his note cards. He raised his hands up to the heavens. At that moment, a merciless wall of impossibly cold air ripped through the crowd, instantly freezing everyone and everything it touched. For a man like William Kerr, this was a fitting way for things to end. On a stage, with an entire town frozen in rapt attention for the rest of time. The end.
There's that ice again! Whenever I think we're getting close, it comes along and ruins everything! Maybe we should just quit? Maybe you should just close the book, walk away, and never think of me again.
No, I don't mean that. We got a little closer this time. We just need to try again. Please. Luca drew himself up and decided to take the only option they had left. Flight. He squinted down the barrel of the mission control defense cannon, aiming it through an opening in the dense tree branches. He looked up with surprise as it struck true and taut. Luca and Iggy winced as they sprinted through the thicket. The branches clawed at them, reluctant to give passage. After what felt like a marathon, Luca stopped in his tracks as they reached the clearing. That was all he was able to say before Iggy slammed into his back. The boys tumbled down a steep decline and crashed with a wheezing thud on a surface as hard as ice. In fact, it was ice. Chapter 5. Signs. They stood silently, catching their breath. The sky was like sapphire. With each breath, a plume of steam escaped from Luca's lungs. Let's keep moving. Luca pulled Iggy to his feet as they gazed across a snowy terrain. Luca had almost forgotten the walkie-talkie he was carrying. Luca looked at Iggy with a resigned sigh. Luca responded. Luca winced, shoving the walkie-talkie back into his pocket. The boys stared in disbelief at the sign that now clearly read, "Well..." The fencing glistened, each chain link encapsulated with a translucent layer of ice. Looking down at the frozen stream, Luca could faintly see a school of minnows encased in the ice. The crunching of footsteps trailing Luca went hush. He looked back to see Iggy's face twisted with confusion. Luca peered upward at the darkening sky. He let out a long, foggy breath. Faintly, Iggy began to cry. Seeing Iggy in such a pathetic state gave Luca a sense of compassion and more than a little guilt. Luca allowed himself to collapse next to Iggy. The boys huddled together for warmth and comfort. If not for exhaustion, their minds would be racing, trying to make sense of the events of the day. As it was, all they had energy for was to sit in silence. Iggy motioned sarcastically to his half-deformed face. Iggy shrugged. Iggy now wept openly. He wiped his nose with a sleeve. Luca gave a warm chuckle. Iggy cleared his throat as he wiped his eyes. Iggy arched into a wide yawn. Luca's eyelids began to slowly drift shut. That's all Luca could whisper before succumbing to sleep. Iggy snuggled in some more. The house smelled of warm bread. Luca was playing with toy blocks on the living room rug. He looked up to see his parents on the couch. His mother held his father's head in her lap. She idly stroked his hair while humming a song. A voice behind Luca spoke. "This is how you remember them, huh?" Luca turned to see his own face, the doppelganger from his dreams, still clad in a yellow hazmat suit, still carrying a look of disdain behind empty eyes. Aww, look at this perfectly cozy scene. You know, it wasn't really like this. The figure picked up a toy block and inspected it. It's amazing the facades that one can build given the right materials. Not that I blame us. These are a child's memories, all warm and fuzzy. You don't remember, do you? Luca snatched the block from the figure's yellow-gloved hand. Remember? The doppelganger pointed to the couch. The last day we saw him alive. The day he chose to abandon us. Luca turned to look at his father, still lounging on the couch. That's not true. He didn't abandon us. The doppelganger waved his hand dismissively. Everything is true here. It's just a matter of what we choose to see. Well, let me show you. The world flickered and pulsed. Luca was sitting next to his bed, listening to his heartbeat with one of his dad's stethoscope. The doppelganger limped into the room. Now, we both know that's not how this went. He grabbed Luca's hand and guided the stethoscope to the floor. Luca heard muffled shouting, brought close by the stethoscope. It was his parents. Do you remember what we did next? Luca gave a slow nod and crept down the hall to peek through the banister. He could see the outline of his mother at the bottom of the stairs. Damn it, Walt. We can't afford to get involved in this. She was scared. His father stepped forward. What am I supposed to do? Just watch? There's a sickness in this town, and we both know who's behind it. I swore an oath to help people. I won't turn my back on them. Luca's mother grabbed Walt. She was crying, pleading. I can't lose you. Walt calmly removed Eleanor's hand from his shoulder. What's right is right, and what's wrong is wrong. I could never live with myself if I let Sharper get away with this. Eleanor raised her voice. Spare me your bullshit platitudes. What about our son? Luca flinched, dropping the stethoscope down the stairs. Walt turned with a panicked smile. Luca? Is that you, buddy? With tears in his eyes, Luca descended the stairs. Mom? Dad? What's going on? Walt dropped to a knee to meet Luca eye to eye. Nothing, buckaroo. Your mom and I just got a little overexcited is all. Luca placed the stethoscope against his father's chest. His heart was racing. It sounded like you were going somewhere? Walt gently removed the device from Luca's ears. Listen to me, Luca. I have some business to take care of. I'll be back in time to tuck you in. Luca hugged his father tightly. Promise? Walt stood up and walked to the door. He glanced over his shoulder. I promise. With a wink and a grin, he put on his hat and strode out into the evening sun. A figure approached soundlessly from the foggy snowfall. It stood above them, lingering in contemplation. Slowly raising one hand above Iggy, it snapped out 2 brisk raps on his head. From a deep slumber, Iggy sprang up defensively. Whether it was the calming presence or the recognition that he was not in danger, Iggy felt his clenched fists lower. Luca looked up, gradually remembering his whereabouts. The figure exhaled a cloud of warm vapor. When it came to complete strangers, Iggy had trouble cobbling together an insult. Iggy huffed with gratification. Nat began to turn away indifferently. Iggy turned sharply and began to stomp off. Realizing he'd worn their patience then, Nat relented. Luca and Iggy turned around with hope in their eyes. Nat took a deep breath in. Nat exhaled slowly, then snapped his fingers. For a brief moment, Luca and Iggy let themselves believe that some great magic was about to unfold, until they opened their eyes and found themselves in the exact same place, cold and disheartened. Nat narrowed his eyes, furrowed his brow, and uttered. Luca began to laugh uncomfortably. He looked down at his feet. His eyes started back and forth in contemplation. With a sudden pain, a thought struck him. He sprinted off into the pale distance. As Iggy turned to follow, Nat called out. Chapter 6. The Source. Nat expressed his sympathy with a shrug and sauntered off as unassumingly as he'd arrived. He'd given Luca and Iggy what they needed, and nothing more. As Luca sprinted across the snow, the events of the past few days became clearer, pieces to a larger puzzle. Rollo said he was underground somewhere, captured. Mr. Kerr tried to cover it up with lies. The clipboards were hell-bent on capturing Iggy. It all seemed to point to perennial harvest. But right now, there was one thing that Luca needed to know. Luca stopped dead in his track. The tree was gone, uprooted and moved, leaving a rock. He dropped to his knees and dug wildly at the cold. His numb hands hit something hard, a headstone. A dry whisper escaped Luca's. There was no reply, just snow-covered silence. Iggy finally noticed the tears welling in Luca's eyes and the snow-covered grave. Suddenly, they heard the crunch of approaching footsteps in the snow. He bent down to scoop up a snowball and lobbed it playfully. Luca stuttered through heaving sobs. Iggy gave Luca a solid smack on the back of his head. Luca wiped his eyes with a... Iggy flashed a mischievous smile and cracked his knuckles. Iggy and Luca shared a skeptical... Iggy darted behind a large pine and began digging. He emerged holding a shoebox with a crude skull painted on. Luca rolled his eyes with. Iggy stifled a chuckle. Iggy triumphantly raised the shoebox. Luca and Iggy inched up to the edge of the hole with bewilderment in their eyes. Arctic air breathed out of the cavern in heaving gusts. Mr. Kerr gazed down the abyss in contemplation. Kerr scratched the back of his head. His face contorted into a saccharine grin. Kerr snapped his fingers. Iggy turned to Luca with a sly glance. Iggy waved the box into the air, threatening to drop it down the hole. Iggy plucked a single bottle rocket from the box and held it up with reverence. After a long pause, Mr. Kerr flung up his hand with frustration. Mr. Kerr sighed into the frigid air. With a nonchalant flick, Iggy tossed the firework into the hole. With a growl, Kerr leapt at Iggy, crashing through Luca. Iggy tried to twist away, but in the struggle, they both tumbled over the side. Luca dove forward, bracing Iggy's hand just before it slipped. His grip was made precarious by the cold, wet snow. He could see Kerr further down, clinging to Iggy's coat. Mr. Kerr gasped with insult. With a wild look in his eye, Mr. Kerr began to hum a proud melody. Luca's hand began to cramp. His voice began to crack. Luca felt Iggy loosen his grasp. Every muscle in Luca's body burned. Luca felt his hand slipping. A calm settled over Iggy's face. Iggy's voice was colder than the bitter air billowing from the chasm. Luca had no choice but to refuse Iggy's request. He tightened his grip and reached for the walkie-talkie in his pocket. A wild delight crept onto Mr. Kerr's face. "That's a good lad. Now, read." Iggy begged Luca with his eyes one last time, but Luca pressed the button and called out, We need help. Mr. Kerr is in danger." It wasn't long before they were once again surrounded by... Mr. Kerr sighed with relieved frustration. "There you are. You really are a worthless lot, aren't you?" "Mirror, now." A clipboard dutifully produced an ornate ivory hand mirror, and Mr. Kerr began preening his tousled hair. "Ah, that's better. Mr. Van Horn, I applaud your sharp thinking under duress. I'll put in a good word for you with the founder. Take them away." A swarm of hands overpowered Luca. The last thing he saw before a cloth bag was pulled over his head was the defeated look on Iggy's face. The end. I think this was one of those times where doing the right thing was the wrong thing. Luca had no choice but to accept Iggy's request. With a quiet blink, Luca watched a teardrop sail down into the howling void. As his fingers slowly gave up, he met eyes with Iggy. The two silhouettes were swallowed by darkness. have some idea what that would look like. A fierce twinkle flashed in Nat's eyes. With a chuckle, Nat turned and walked west. Dumbfounded, Luca followed behind him, trudging through the snow. Every step taking him further away from everyone and everything he knew, and closer to destiny. To be continued. Beacon Pines, pines harder. Revenge served cold. Second times. Wait, that's it? This ends with a crummy cliffhanger just when it was getting good? I was even starting to like Iggy. No way. I refuse to be associated with some never-ending parade of sequels. Let's go back and find something more definitive. They'd run the class. Luca and Rollo ducked behind a barrel, leaving Beck to her task. With a few crisp snaps, she roused Mr. Tolliver. Mr. Tolliver looked down and shifted a bit, testing his restraints. Beck caught herself before letting the surprise manifest on her face. She'd already gotten him to reveal his relation to Gran. This was going to be easy. Mr. Tolliver wriggled a bit in his restraints. Beck quickly removed the ropes. Mr. Tolliver rubbed the growing knot on his forehead. Beck twirled her hand, as if to prompt Mr. Tolliver to finish her thought. Beck shook her head and clicked her tongue. Mr. Tolliver let out an amused huff in agreement. Beck was on a roll now, playing Mr. Tolliver like a fiddle. Heading for the stairs, Mr. Tolliver hesitated and turned to Beck with a puzzled look. She grinned and gave him a peppy wave. With a shrug, he continued up the stairs, whistling a jaunty tune. Beck blinked slowly in disappointment. She turned to the table and began tearing small scraps of paper. Beck marked each scrap of paper and leaned back. Luca and Beck looked at Rollo with amazement. Luca tied a bent nail onto the line. If all you have is a hammer,